Okay, so have you ever, like, watched a teenager and kind of wondered, what are they thinking?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on in their brain? Why would they do that? I feel like we've all been there.
Oh, absolutely.
And today we are going deep, diving deep into all of that with this really interesting source. It's called Adolescent Risk Behaviors: Why Teens Experiment and Strategies to Keep Them Safe.
Yeah.
And you might be thinking, oh, my kid's fine, like this doesn't apply to me. But really, this is about all teenagers.
Right.
This is about that stage of life, not about kids who are, troubled or anything.
Exactly. And for a long time, there was this kind of perception that teens were just difficult,
Right?
that
Yeah.
they were just a different species almost.
Yeah, like a totally different species.
Exactly. But thankfully, research has really moved us past that view.
Yeah.
And we're able to see that it's not just about hormones and bad decisions, although those play a part,
Mm-hmm.
but there's actually a neurological reason why teenagers tend to take more risks.
Okay.
Their brains are literally still under construction.
Oh, wow. So it's not just them being difficult. There's actually a developmental reason.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing.
It is really amazing. And to kind of appreciate how far we've come, we can go back to 1904. There was this psychologist, G. Stanley Hall,
Okay.
and he wrote this book, Adolescents, Psychology, and he called it a period of storm and stress,
Oh, wow.
which, it was a very kind of, influenced by his time.
Right.
And it was a very negative view of adolescence, saying it was tumultuous, that it was, kind of morally degenerate. Thankfully, we've moved past that.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness for progress.
Yeah,
So, okay, so we shouldn't be looking at teenagers like they're these ticking time bombs, but we should be viewing them as still developing.
works in progress.
What's in progress, okay?
Exactly.
I like that.
Their brains are still trying to develop that capacity for complex thought and planning and emotional regulation, and all of that is not fully online yet.
So it's like a computer that's downloading a software update. It's still working, but it might be a little glitchy.
I love that analogy. That's a perfect analogy.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, this kind of stage of brain development mirrors toddlers.
Really?
Yeah,
The
it's-
tantrums. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, they're going through that same thing,
Wow.
but with much more complex emotions
And higher stakes.
and higher stakes. Exactly.
Yeah, because if a toddler throws a tantrum, it's, but
Okay.
a teenager, it could be a lot.
Exactly.
Okay, so if their emotional software is still in beta testing,
Mm-hmm.
how does their childhood, their early childhood, how does that play into this really important time in their development?
Well, that's what gets really interesting, is that healthy attachment in early childhood plays a huge role in how they kind of develop independence during adolescence.
Okay.
It's like building a strong foundation.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So what does healthy attachment look like, and how does that translate to a better time as a teenager?
So imagine a child that, receives love and care
Hmm?
consistently from their caregivers.
Yeah.
This develops in them a sense of trust and security,
Right.
knowing that their needs are going to be met.
Yeah.
And so then they can explore the world knowing or feeling more confident
Okay.
and resilient.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're not crippled by fear or insecurity when they face challenges. They have that, that secure base.
So a secure kid is more likely to be a well-adjusted teenager
Exactly.
who can handle, all the ups and downs.
Exactly. They have that inner compass
Okay.
that helps them navigate.
Got it. So it's not just about the individual. They're also navigating, all of the social stuff. And that's where I imagine like gender roles and stuff come in.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. Like we layer a whole other dimension onto this brain development of societal expectations.
Right. Yeah.
And those expectations, those gender roles, have a huge impact on how they develop relationships, especially as they start dating and yeah.
And that is what we're going to unpack next. How do those messages of, boys will be boys and all of that, how does that actually play into how teenagers form relationships, especially as they start to explore romantic relationships and all of that?
And it's interesting because it's like from the moment they're born,
Right.
they're getting all these messages
Yeah.
about what it means to be a boy or a girl.
Right. Like even the
The
clothes,
clothes, the toys,
the color.
the language we use.
Yeah. It's either pink or blue.
Exactly.
There's not a lot of in between.
Yeah. And so it's like, even before they understand what gender is, they're getting all these messages about what's normal or what's appropriate.
Yeah. And so that then translates into how they play with each other, right?
Exactly.
Like even at a young age.
Oh, yeah. And researchers have found fascinating differences in how boys and girls play, even from a young age.
Really?
Yeah, so boys, even in preschool, gravitate towards games and activities that have, like, clear winners and losers. They like that. Competition, the hierarchy.
There's like roughhousing and like sports,
Yes.
video games, all of that.
All of that. And girls tend to prioritize cooperation more in their play.
So they'd rather play, with dolls and
Yes.
have that kind of like nurturing.
Exactly. And more collaborative
Yeah.
in their play.
Huh.
So it's fascinating to see those differences from such a young age.
So by the time they're teenagers, they've already internalized a lot of these rules, these unwritten rules.
Exactly.
And then those rules then kind of come into play as they're trying to figure out romantic relationships.
Yes, exactly. And that's where the peer pressure comes in.
Okay.
During adolescence, that need to fit in to be accepted by your peers
Yeah.
becomes so intense.
Oh, yeah.
And one way that teens police each other's behavior,
Okay.
often unintentionally, is by reinforcing these gender norms.
So it's like society gives them these messages about gender, they internalize them, and then their friends reinforce it.
Exactly.
Wow. So it's like this vicious cycle.
It is. And it can manifest in, not so great ways,
Okay.
like bullying, for example.
Okay.
But it can also be, a little more subtle.
Okay.
Like one really interesting example is the use of homophobic language,
Okay.
even among teenagers who aren't homophobic.
Right.
Like they'll use, certain words as insults, not necessarily because they have anything against gay people.
But just because it's not masculine or...
Exactly. It's like they're policing each other's adherence to these gender norms.
So it's more about staying in line with what's expected of you as a boy, for example.
Exactly. And it just highlights how much these rigid roles can limit how teenagers express themselves.
And probably feel as well.
Exactly.
Like if they don't fit into that box.
Yeah, and that pressure to conform can lead them to do things they wouldn't normally do.
Right.
Just to fit in.
So we've got brain development, we've got societal expectations, we've got peer pressure, and all of these things are kind of coalescing during these teenage years. So what does this actually look like in terms of, what are teenagers facing? Is it the stereotypical sex, drugs, and rock and roll? I mean, is it more complicated than that?
It's definitely more complicated than that, and it's not just that simple, although those things are part of it.
Right.
But we're talking about a whole range of things, from substance use to dating violence,
Wow.
gang involvement, eating disorders, depression, self-harm. It's a lot.
Yeah, it really is. And I imagine that these things, they're all like related.
Absolutely, yeah. They're all interconnected.
So it's not just one thing.
Right, one thing can lead to another. It's like this domino effect.
Okay.
So, for example, a teen who's struggling with body image,
Right.
they might turn to substances to cope with those feelings.
Right.
Or a teenager, who's experiencing dating violence, they might be more likely to join a gang to find that sense of belonging and protection.
That makes sense. So it's all connected. It's all, one can kind of influence the other. So with all of this going on internally, externally, all the stuff we've been talking about, how much does the media play into all of this?
Yeah, the media has a huge influence.
Right.
From magazines to social media.
Right. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere, and they're constantly being bombarded with messages about what's cool, what's desirable,
Right.
what's normal, and often these messages reinforce the same stereotypes
That we've been talking about.
that we've been talking about. Exactly.
Wow. So it's like this constant pressure
Yes,
of who you should be, what you should look like.
exactly. And for a teenager who's already feeling insecure or vulnerable,
Right.
those messages can be devastating.
Right.
Think about the way women are portrayed in advertising. They're often,
Like perfect.
hypersexualized, airbrushed.
Yeah,
It's not real. And then you've got social media, where everyone's portraying these perfect lives.
right. So it's hard to know what's real and what's not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it creates this illusion of, happiness and achievement.
That's not attainable.
It's not attainable, and it just leads to comparison
Right. And self-doubt.
and
Sure.
self-doubt.
It's interesting. I feel like even as adults, we struggle with that.
Oh, absolutely. We all do.
Okay. So with all of this, it can feel very overwhelming. Like, are we just doomed? Are teenagers just doomed to make these mistakes? And
No, not at all.
Okay.
There's actually a lot we can do to help them.
Okay.
But first, We have to move past some of these myths about what actually works in prevention.
Okay, like what?
So things like zero tolerance policies
Okay.
or abstinence-only programs.
Right, which a lot of people, I think are the answer.
Yeah, they seem like the easy answer,
Right.
but they've actually been shown to be ineffective
Really?
at best.
Wow.
And at worst, they can actually be harmful.
Why is that?
Well, because they're often too simplistic.
Okay.
They don't address the complexity of the issue,
Right.
and they tend to rely on punishment and fear
Okay.
rather than understanding and empathy.
So what does work?
Well, the most effective strategies are those that are comprehensive, skills-based, relationship-focused, and gender-strategic.
Okay, so it's not just don't do this. It's like a multi-pronged approach.
Exactly. It's like building a safety net.
I like that.
Right, instead of just putting up warning signs.
Okay, so break that down for us a little bit. What does that look like? Like, what's a comprehensive approach?
So a comprehensive approach means tackling the issue from multiple angles,
Okay.
recognizing that risk-taking doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's influenced by the teen's family,
Right, their school.
their peers, their community.
So it takes a village.
It takes a village, exactly.
Right.
And so a comprehensive strategy addresses all of those systems.
Okay, so it's not just on the parents. It's not just on the teachers.
Right, it's everyone working together.
Got it. Okay.
And then skills-based.
What kind of skills are we talking about?
So communication skills,
Mhm.
assertiveness training, conflict resolution, critical thinking,
Okay.
decision-making skills.
So like life skills.
Exactly, life skills
Yeah.
that will help them navigate these situations.
And then the relationship piece, because you said it's relationship focused too.
Yes, and this is crucial.
Okay.
Having strong, healthy relationships with positive role models.
So parents, teachers,
Teachers, mentors,
coaches,
coaches, all of those people can make a world of difference.
because then they have someone to go to
Exactly.
who will listen.
Someone they can trust.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last piece you said was gender strategic. What does that mean?
So that means recognizing that gender roles and expectations influence how teens experience and respond to risk.
Oh, that's interesting because we've talked about how boys and girls kind of experience the world differently.
Exactly.
So we can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach.
We have to tailor our approach to their unique experiences.
This has been really, really eye-opening. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners as they're, processing all of this information?
I think the most important thing to remember is that adolescence is a time of incredible potential,
Okay.
but it's also a time of vulnerability. And by understanding all of these forces at play,
The brain development.
the brain development, the social pressures, the gender roles, the media
Oh, is that
influence,
it?
we can empower them
Okay.
to make healthier choices, and we can create environments that support their well-being.
That's a great message. That's a good message. And it's not easy,
It's not easy.
but it's doable. And it sounds like it takes all of us.
It does. It takes all of us.
Okay, well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for talking to us about all of this today. This is really important stuff.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It was great being here.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of teenagers and all of their,
All their quirks.
all the things that make them them. Be sure to check out our show notes for links to resources mentioned in today's episode. And until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep those conversations going.